Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com. Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to what I think promises to be a very interesting and informative episode of Past the Wire TV. In a minute, I'm going to be joined by Ben Mosier, the Executive Director of HIWU, and Shaun Richards, the Lead Investigator of HIWU, which is, an organization that works directly with HISA in the investigation and enforcement and regulation side of what goes on. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. I think we'll find out a lot about the investigative and regulatory side of HISA and HIWU that we might not know. Hopefully we can clarify some misconceptions, get some clarity, get some understanding as to what their goal is. One of the things that I know they did want to get across is that they do want to be looked at as a resource and an ally of the industry. We'll get into more of that during the show, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the show, and I don't think that these two gentlemen have done any other interviews or shows, so it should be interesting to hear from them. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you all enjoy it.
In the Breeders' Cup Classic, Vino Rosso has taken the lead, and it's a vintage performance by Vino Rosso.
Okay, Shaun and Ben, thank you so much for coming on Past the Wire TV. I'm going to try and roll through the questions without asking follow-up questions, which I normally do, because I want to get all the questions that we have asked and answered, and if we've got some time at the end for follow-up, we'll address that then. But let's start with you gentlemen telling us a little bit about your backgrounds and how you wound up at HIWU.
Back in, I guess it was at the very beginning of 2022, and I was the head of business development for Drug-Free Sport. So kind of built out the plan, worked closely with HISA when Lisa Lazarus was first hired, and we worked together to come up with what is now HIWU.
Gotcha. And Shaun, what about you? A little bit about your background and how you wound up with HIWU and your position at HIWU.
Okay. Well, I spent 23 years of my life as an FBI agent in New York City, primarily investigating Russian organized crime. Late in 2017, I had the investigation material come across my desk, pitched by Five Stones Investigations regarding the alleged doping in the racehorse industry. So I was able to take my, knowledge from the FBI and apply it to the racehorse doping investigation that led to Servis and Navarro. Prior to the FBI, I had grown up in and around the racehorse industry. I come from South Jersey, about 20 miles east of Philadelphia. I have a 200-acre farm. My dad's passion, hobby was always having racehorses. So we always had, a handful of thoroughbreds. He changed over to standardbreds as I got older, and sometimes he'd have as many as 10 or 15 horses that he was training at the farm. So I was able to combine both those worlds, my investigative knowledge and my knowledge of the racehorse industry, to take a good look at the case that ended up being the Servis Navarro case.
So you actually have owned racehorses?
Well, I don't know that I've owned them, but my family has owned them. Yes,
Gotcha.
Exactly.
All right, let's get right into some questions, and like I said, we're not going to do any follow-up. We're just going to ask the questions that I think we want to get out there, and at the end, if we've got any time for follow-up, we'll address it at that point. But we'll start with this. Considering HISA was aware of what they were undertaking, and they essentially began around the end of May 2023. How much time do you guys feel, and either one of you can take this, how much time do you feel is appropriate for a learning curve and a continuation of adjusting and or changing, amending rules as we go along?
Well, I can start. I think we will always see rules adjusted. I think that's normal in all anti-doping programs. I think programs have to evolve over time and have to be realistic, achievable. And so, we've already seen it in 2023 where we started with a set of rules that were approved by the FTC. And those were the rules we are forced to regulate when we started on May 22nd. And soon after, we began the process to identify rules that are not working well. And we made immediate changes, or HISA made immediate changes. HIWU can't make changes to the rules. That's HISA. But we do have input, and we began an immediate review of the rules to go into effect hopefully soon in 2024. And that also included tremendous input from many organizations within the industry. So it will always be an involvement of the rules, in my opinion.
Okay.
No, and I agree with that. And I think that's one of the refreshing things about a program that's set up in this fashion is we are flexible. We meet the needs of our mission as it develops. And it's not draconian in a sense that the rules are here, this is it. And some of the rules necessarily don't match the overall goal of what we're trying to accomplish. So that is a very strong point. And I agree with Ben that it's something that will change over time. And I think it's something that we need to change over time to best address the trends and the way in which the mission and the program is applied to the industry.
And if I can, I think the industry, what I've seen this year is a lot of buy-in that industry organizations believe they do have a voice, because they've seen changes happen both immediately when HISA sends out maybe an enforcement ruling or a notification to the industry that they're going to enforce a rule this way. But a lot of the input we received from sportsmen's groups, from other industry organizations, from veterinarians, HISA has their horsemen's advisory group. All that input was considered into this new revision of the rules that we will see hopefully soon in 2024.
Okay. It was pretty much the understanding or the perception of the industry that, HISA was intended to create uniformity, clear-cut defined rules, a level playing field, and at this point, would you say, either one of you again can take this, that there could have been maybe a better launch or a different form of preparation that might have eliminated or circumvented some of the missteps or hiccups that we had coming out of the gate?
I think it was out of our control, if you're asking from a HIWU perspective. So, HIWU, at the end of the day, we report to HISA, right? And HISA reports to the FTC, and there's just a lot of government involved in this. So we were set to start this program on January 1st, but if you look back, this program was actually supposed to start a year before that. But, negotiations fell through with the original plan of USADA, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, to be the enforcement agency. So that delayed it. So, I think the best way to answer that is we did the best we could on the start date that we were given. And I think looking back, we did a great job starting in the middle of Triple Crown season and during the high volume time of racing of the year going into the summer. So, yeah.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Shaun, or no?
Well, I don't know that I don't know that you could do anything different than what transpired given the circumstances and the lay of the land. And sure, I'm sure there's things that we would have liked to do differently or a little more efficiently. But at the same time, when you launch anything, that is of this size and magnitude to an industry that is very varied across the jurisdictions, there's going to be very different situations that you're going to have to adapt to. And, there's no good way to launch it other than, rip the Band-Aid off and get going. Okay. And we handled a lot of things, a lot of moving parts. And I agree with Ben. I think, all in all, we did a pretty good job of staying with it and pushing the program forward.
Okay. Do you think that when the launch ultimately happened and we had a couple of incidents where like stewards misinterpreted some of the rules and a lot of backlash, was created as a result of that. Do you think that contributed into some of the, I'm going to word this carefully, lack of enthusiasm and lack of support that certain horsemen seem to show towards HISA and HIWU?
Sure. I think any change creates a certain level of uncertainty. When we did start, we worked as hard as we could to educate the industry across the board, whether it was horsemen, whether it was trackside workers, whether it was stewards, veterinarians. There's so many individuals and organizations to educate about certain aspects of the rules. But that didn't stop on May 22nd. And, it kind of goes towards my point earlier about the rules themselves. We took the feedback and we were always open to listen, to talk to individuals at any time of the day, to answer questions. And I think we've seen, just a lot of progress made on how this new system works.
Gotcha. This is something that you guys might not be able to answer, and then again you might. HISA had came out and to their credit admitted not getting it right or getting it wrong when it came to intra-articular injections, and that rule was ultimately amended, and I think they do it is much better now. Are there any other rules that you can talk about or maybe even generalize that are currently under review, consideration for amendment and or changing, or is that something we're just tackling as we go along and as it comes up?
I can start, Shaun, if you want to add, but I think the biggest upcoming change right now is how human substances of abuse are going to be regulated. There's a lot of talk about unintended transfers, contamination, things like that. And I think that's being addressed in a lot of ways. Number one, the rules are going to carve out a subset of human substances of abuse, and they will have lesser penalties with those if it does come up. If you look at the grand scheme of things, we don't have a lot of positives of those substances. We've done over 55,000 horses tested in the first 7-8 months of this program, and we have roughly 15 human substances of abuse that have come up. So it's not a real high percentage in any way, but of course, every time one does come up, it does make the headlines. But I think another way that HISA is looking to address that is, again, education, making sure horsemen understand that, you know, they are ultimately responsible for those around them, but the tracks too, you know, when the HISA goes into look at racetrack accreditation, and they're looking at individual tracks, you know, they're also going to be looking at cleanliness of receiving barns and things like that. So I think, you know, everybody has a part within this particular subject.
All right, that kind of leads. If Shaun, if you don't have anything to add, that does
Well,
kind of
only thing that I would add, that goes back to the topic we talked about earlier about flexibility and common sense approach to the job at hand.
right.
And, you know, and relying on science to drive how we attack the problem with these type of substances, which, you know, they've done a very good job at, you know, applying common sense to the actual task at hand.
Gotcha. Agreed. Actually, you know, you mentioned some of these substances. One of the things I wanted to bring up was contamination. Contamination seems to be becoming a common defense. At times, it appears iffy or questionable as to whether or not it's truly contamination, and at times, it appears that it legitimately is. You know, good possibility that it's contamination. Can you speak towards any HIWU methods or procedures to identify true contamination cases more quickly from false contamination cases? Because it seems fast tracking the obvious contamination cases would help the industry, horsemen, and HIWU. So, is there anything being done to kind of, you know, fast track those obvious contamination cases and just get rid of them or adjudicate them, you know, fairly and quickly?
So there's a few things, and there is a policy in this system that exists for what we would call environmental contamination, and there's a sub list of substances called specified substances. I believe it's 26 or 28 substances on this list. These are substances typically found in environmental settings such as bedding, feed, things like that, that are typically out of the control of the covered person or the horseman. And that policy is meant to protect the horseman. And so if we get a result, an atypical result of one of these substances, that is not made public. And what we do is we investigate that substance in collaboration with the horseman, with the track, with the racing commission, to find out if that was truly there and out of the control of the covered person. So, and that system is working, and it's not something, again, I said it's not made public to protect the horseman. And we have had over 20 instances of atypical findings already. And the majority of those have been dismissed and deemed negative, and nobody will ever know about those investigations. So that is certainly allowed in the rules. Now, the other common contamination, if you will, or unintended transfers, I just spoke about with the human substances of abuse, and how that is also likely going to be addressed in the new rules, assuming the FTC approves those rules. So that is being addressed as well.
Gotcha. Shaun, anything to add to that or no?
Well, I can think of one specific case, the Ray Handel case earlier, where, you know, it was found to be legitimate cross-contamination through the feed. And they moved rather quickly to roll that back and move that investigation along. And, you know, that was a positive move, you know, from an investigative standpoint, from a mission standpoint of the program. You know, if it's legitimately cross-contamination and it's scientifically backed up, we have no problem changing our stance.
Right. You know, so much. I hate to use a cliche, but it just kind of fits. You know, perception and optics goes a long way in our society today. And there was something that happened that ultimately I think you guys got right, but it created a perception that might not be accurate and might not be good for you guys. And I'll go back to it, and maybe you can explain and elaborate on it, and clear that misconception up if it is a misconception. But I believe Norm Cassie a while back had a violation for working or running a horse too close to an injection, and subsequently the rule was changed. Norm's father, Mark, is on the HISA advisory committee. Todd Pletcher at the same time had similar violations. Those are both, well, one's a big name guy, one's an up and coming guy, I would call Norm. But he's the son of, again, someone who's on the advisory committee. The perception in the industry after that was, look, these guys are going after the small guys and the little guys and hurting the small and little guys. And when the big guys or the connected guys have an issue, bang, the rule changes. Now, again, I think that the rule change was good, and that you guys got it right, but it created an optic or a perception in the industry of that type of favoritism. So can you speak towards that and clarify that a little bit, and address how that went down and the perception that developed as a result of it?
Sure. I mean, when the program started on May 22nd, we had far more than just 2 of those violations come in almost immediately. So, this program is completely objective in every way, and we are truly independent. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head and I've spoke to this already. We received feedback from industry organizations, including horsemen's groups, including the Horsemen's Advisory Group that works under HISA, but many others, HBPA groups, Alan Foreman and the THA. I mean, it was addressed because it was a problem, not necessarily about who had the violation. Right away, there was an enforcement announcement from HISA on how we were going to enforce this moving forward until it could be officially addressed in the new rules. And it's actually it's a rule that's going to move from under HIWU's purview completely, and it will actually be part of the racetrack safety program once those rules are approved. Okay.
Anything, Shaun, that you want to add to that, or no?
No, I think Ben covered it, and he even covered it when we were talking about the human contamination with the human drugs. So it's along the same lines. Everything's metered out evenly across the board.
Agreed. The resistance and backlash from certain horsemen. Is that something that you guys anticipated going in? I mean, you guys went into something. I mean, you had a monumental task from the beginning. I don't think there's any secret about that. I mean, racing has, no matter how you slice it, failed to self-regulate and self-police itself for a long time. And we've had a long time to do it. And although there has been some progress, I think at the end of the day, you have to call it a fail. Now you guys step in. Did you anticipate the backlash and resistance from certain horsemen, or was that a surprise to you? Did you think you would be more widespread embrace by the industry?
A combination of both, I guess. If I had to answer, I mean, if I'm answering from a personal standpoint, I described how I came to be in the role that I am now. And when we took that initial call, quickly began talking to many different industry organizations. And so, it wasn't a surprise. I don't know if I would, there's certainly upset individuals at various times about certain matters. The legal challenges, I certainly try to stay away from. HIWU at the end of the day has no say in the matter and is very far removed from any of those legal challenges. So I like to tell people that until somebody tells us otherwise, we're just going to keep our heads down and do the job that we're supposed to do. So we just handle each situation that comes up and try to educate those individuals on how the rules are supposed to work. And for the most part, people are understanding of that. And especially when we actually pick up the phone, when we actually react to their concerns and try to do the best we can for each individual case. We're not just have some, dark hood pulled over us where we're not approachable. That's what we're trying to do and try to work with everybody out there.
Gotcha. How is the use of legal therapeutic medications and overages being differentiated from banned illegal substances? How are those two substances handled, those investigations and those penalties broken apart and handled?
So I think this is a really great part of this program because it clearly separates prohibited substances into two very clearly established silos: banned substances versus controlled medications. And the rules themselves actually talk about how the process works with banned substances versus how it works with controlled medications and all of the sanctions and the remaining processes for those. So, the controlled medication side, while important and will always need to be regulated, at the end of the day, the sanctions related to controlled medications are far less. And we even, took from the industry beforehand the multiple penalty point system that was in place with many of the jurisdictions. So, a lot of that hasn't changed at the end of the day on controlled meds. So I think the system got that right. And when you look at our public disclosures page on the HIWU website, I think you can see that the industry has done a really nice job at adapting to the changes with the controlled medications. And, we're not seeing a lot of positives, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. I don't know how you're going to answer this, but I find it interesting. If cheating or juicing is as widespread as a lot of bettors in the game perceive and think it is, why do you guys think more trainers do not publicly come forward? Because if that is true, that would be a direct impact on their livelihoods, and a lot of them are already struggling. So if it is as widespread as some of the public and some of the quote customers and bettors believe it is, why do more trainers not come forward and expose that? Because I mean, you guys have been around this long enough to know that most people on the backside know what's going on the backside.
Well, I can speak to that, and I would say that goes back to the historical way that the industry was regulated. For example, you would have a trainer that would come forward and would give good information to investigators, and they might go out and investigate and come to an end in that investigation, which resulted in penalties or fines. In many instances, the penalties and fines were not significant and not necessarily consistently administered. So the person that would get in trouble would get days, a small fine, his life would go on. Whereas the guy that did the right thing, the trainer that stood up, many times would get blackballed out of the industry, business-wise. So it's a cultural thing. And then the differences between the different jurisdictions and race commissions, the differences in the rules allowed for that type of situation to be exploited. Because if a trainer doesn't have a consistent base point to operate on, and they move into a different area, different jurisdiction, and the rules change slightly, it's never something they can count on. They have no concrete footing to base their actions on. And then when you have guys that stand up, do the right thing, that get punished from the industry, there's no incentive to stand up and be a stand-up guy. And you're right, they're all competing against each other, and they're taking food off their plate. But the fact that the rules have not been administered consistently historically has led to that. That's a big cultural shift that has to happen. We have to get good people to stand up and be willing to contribute through testifying and through evidence that helps us pursue these rules. One of the things that we're doing that's differently is when we have a finding, there will be an outcome. Whereas before, many times, and not for all nefarious reasons, things got lost in the system, things weren't pursued, it was close to the end of the meet, let's just wait, we'll administer the punishment in the off days. All that's gone now. If we have a finding, there are certain steps that are triggered investigatively through the prosecution of these type of violations that move forward. So that gives you a good starting point for some consistency that you can count on. It's going to be there every time.
All right. How about the tip line? Has the tip line proven to be successful? Is it something that's working out the way that you guys hoped that it would?
Yeah, it's been fruitful.
Okay.
And the fact that we have anonymous abilities where people can, interact with us, and we have the ability to reach back out and expand on that conversation all anonymously has proven to be, really, really fruitful. In the investigations that we've had, many times I'm getting information fed to us through that tip line that actually ties in pretty accurately to an ongoing investigation. So that tells me that the apparatus that we've set up, the investigations, the full-time guys that are out there working, trying to develop relationships with confidential informants, whistleblowers, confidential sources, industry people are collecting the information, whether it be through interactions as investigators or through the tip lines, and we're collecting all the information and we're applying it to investigations as need be. Very rarely do I get a call from Ben or Lisa, and they ask me a question: did you hear about this, or you know about this incident? For the most part, I know about it through our system. Now, doesn't mean all that information we're collecting is accurate or applicable to the rules and regulations, but we're actually collecting it. And that's a big difference between what was going on in the industry as a whole before and now. The local race commissions didn't have the bandwidth to collect, information, put it in a database and draw on it as need. They just weren't set up or tooled for that. Conversely, we've expanded. Instead of just local jurisdictions, we have the whole country. So we have the ability to collect all over the United States, put it in the one database, and apply it wherever those trainers or those horsemen go, within our system.
Okay, I've only got a couple more questions, but I saved the good ones for the end, or at least the ones I think are good. So I'll try and go through them as quick as possible because I respect both of your time. We kind of touched base on this, but let's get into it from another angle. Can you talk a little bit about the anonymity in some of the testing processes? When there is a positive test and the lab is dealing with it, isn't there some anonymity to that as well? Like if a lab is handling or investigating a positive, do they necessarily know who the trainer is or who the horse is?
No, absolutely not. No,
that's what I'm talking about. I'm trying to just get out there's some anonymity in the testing process where the lab doesn't know that they're investigating trainer A or trainer B or trainer C.
No, there's zero connection. The system that we've implemented in the collection process, which likely isn't all that different than what was done before. At the end of the day, it's about uniformity across the board. But we've implemented an electronic chain of custody across all of the tracks that we conduct testing at. And so there's a sample code applied to each sample collected. Within our system, we can match that sample to the trainer, to the horse. But those samples, when they go to the lab, only are known by a sample code. So, they don't know whose sample that belongs to at the end of the day.
Okay. As far as the labs, the selection of the labs that you guys use and the insurance of their honesty and integrity, how is that handled by HIWU? How do you select the labs, and how are they regulated or their integrity insured so people can be comfortable that the labs are 100% on the up and up?
Yeah. So the statute itself allowed for the utilization of all RMTC accredited laboratories. So the RMTC is still the accreditation body that we use right now while we transition to our accrediting rules and regulations. But the law itself actually allowed for that transition. So I guess what I'm saying is all the labs currently being used were already being used in the industry. We spoke to, at the time, there were 9 RMTC accredited laboratories. We ended up using 6 of those. And that was just through negotiations around pricing, just location of where they are, just very extensive negotiations with all those laboratories. And so when the dust settled, we had 6 laboratories to start our program with in May of last year. It will always be an involvement with the laboratories. We work very closely with them. We consider them partners. They've had to go through some very extensive changes and upgrades through this first year. Uniformity in the laboratory setting is a challenge and will always be a challenge. And I can tell you that it remains a challenge outside of the horse racing industry. I come from the human anti-doping world where there are 30 laboratories across the world that do all the Olympic testing in the world, and they're accredited by the World Anti-Doping Agency. And we actually have on our advisory council at HIWU, Dr. Larry Bowers, who literally wrote the accreditation rules in the human anti-doping world 24 years ago. And now he is on our advisory council working with our team on this on this challenge of lab harmonization. And so, the labs are approaching it really well in collaboration with us, but it's not just a switch we can flip overnight to achieve it. So, what I can say is that in the beginning, on May 22nd, at that point in time, every test being conducted was for the same substances. There's a core group of 300 plus substances that every lab has the ability to detect. And that's what they were searching for, but they're also allowed to continue science research and looking for novel substances. So, that's how this program will continue to evolve, is building what all of our partner labs can detect and trying to stay ahead of the game.
Gotcha.
Ben, you want to mention the double blind?
Yeah. So additionally, there some quality assurance initiatives that have been pushed. The RMTC always had a blind sample program. That means it's clearly a test sample, if you will, that's sent to the lab, but it's spiked with unknown substances. So that was already in place. What we've also added are double-blind samples. So these are samples that are literally meant to look like any other post-race or out of competition sample. They come from the track to the lab, and the lab does not know that that's a spiked sample of some sort. So that's a quality initiative that we've pushed out recently with the RMTC, and will be a big piece of our accreditation program when we finally transition to that later on. Another thing is what's called a passed sample exchange, to where cleared samples at one laboratory that they're mandated to keep for a period of time, we may ask that lab to send all those cleared samples to another laboratory to reanalyze, and for educational purposes, make sure that that those labs are not detecting different things, right? So those are two really important quality assurance programs that are going on right now.
Okay. Mike Rapoli started the NTA, or I think it stands for National Thoroughbred Alliance. He appointed himself the commissioner of horse racing, I think, and then amended that to the commissioner of his organization, the NTA. What is the HIWU take on that, if any at all? And does he or the NTA have any authority or voice to actually do anything or implement anything? Or
I mean, if I'm being really truthful, I'm not, outside of reading maybe one article or two, I try to stay away from media and press on what I read. I truly don't have enough information at hand to comment on that.
Fair enough. Shaun, anything about that?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Fair enough. Just a couple more. We're going to wind up with two or three more questions, and I think we're done. I do have one follow-up. That's a quick one and a good one if we have time. Forte and Medina Spirit, I want to mention quickly. HISA, through Lisa Lazarus, said in an article that they wouldn't make any comment about Forte, but then went on in the same article to explain why, under the current rules, his meloxicam positive would not be a violation under the rules today. Never has there been any statement similar or different about Medina Spirit's betamethasone positive. And what strikes me curious about that is that I've spoken to a lot of vets outside of the racing industry, and all of them seem to say the same thing, that meloxicam is a much more serious drug than betamethasone. So I was just curious why there would be a comment about one and not the other. And I'm curious, and I've read the rule, and I don't understand it, so that's probably on me. But would Medina Spirit's betamethasone be a positive under the current set of rules?
I don't actually know the details of that case.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know where, at what level it was detected or what screening limit was being utilized. So I can't actually comment on that. I don't know the details.
Okay. Shaun, do you know?
No.
Okay.
No, and listen, we focused on the starting point of our program.
Okay.
All that stuff that came before is historical in nature and may be of value for an awareness situation, but we really, really specifically started our program fresh and look forward. So we don't have time to go back and rehash things. That there's nothing we could do. There's nothing we would do with that information other than just bank it and know that that happened.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense.
Okay. Last question, and then hopefully time for one follow-up. What happens to the sport of horse racing? Should HISA and HIWU fail?
It's a big question. Shaun, you want to take that one first?
Well, listen, it's difficult to speculate. That's pure opinion. It would definitely not be good for the situation. The best thing would happen is if we go forward, this program is successful, we protect the horse, we protect the industry, things get better. I know this, and this goes back to my previous job. When we conducted those arrests and we took the top trainer out of Freehold, the top 2 trainers out of Monmouth, and the top 2 trainers out of Yonkers Raceway, the business got healthier at those individual racetracks, which was refreshing. So I would say, our program going forward, if it's implemented and successful, it's a good thing for the industry.
Okay.
Yep. I agree with Shaun that it's hard to speculate on such a big question. And at the end of the day, we have to focus on what our mission is and why we exist, and just do the best we can for this industry.
Understood. Understood. My follow-up question was, and I think that there are probably not 2 better guys to answer it than you two. Ben, coming from anti-doping in humans and athletes, and Shaun, with your experience with the FBI, there's always been that perception, and I think the first time we heard it publicly said was back in that Balco steroid case years ago. But there's the perception out there that the cheaters will always be one step ahead of those that are trying to catch them. Is that an accurate statement? Is that the truth?
I think they're always trying to be one step ahead.
Oh.
I think it's a continuous chase. I think history has shown that over time, the true cheaters have been caught. But cheaters are always trying to beat the test, right? So it's just so important that we continue what we've started over the last 7 or 8 months and try to keep up with science, make sure our laboratories are working uniformly and not always sharing information about what they're finding, right? That's some of the most important things. That one lab may develop a methodology for a new novel substance, and what didn't happen pre-HIWU was that methodology gets shared amongst the other laboratories in a immediate fashion. Now that exists. Now the labs are working together with us on making sure that everybody can conduct the best testing possible. But testing isn't just the only tool and resource that we have when you talk about anti-doping. And what Shaun does from an investigative standpoint is just clearly as important as testing. That's why you see testing and investigations always grouped together, because testing relies on investigations. We don't just want to throw a dart at the wall on testing. We want every test to matter and be driven by intelligence. And we want to spend every dollar in the best way possible that this industry has given us. But likewise, testing also drives investigations. We may get a hit on something, which then triggers more investigation. So we just have to make sure that every aspect of this program is working together and driving towards the same goal.
Gotcha. Shaun, I definitely want your FBI agent take on that question? Cheaters always one step ahead, yay or nay?
Well, they're always striving to be one step ahead, and ultimately that's what my job is here, is to explore the new and different trends that are happening out in the racehorse world using the investigative tools. As I described before, and as Ben described, we take information from science, we push information to science. It's a collaborative effort. Then I back it up with the investigators that go out and develop the source base. The best investigations I was ever part of in my professional career prior to are where we had good sources telling us what was going on, and then we worked with our investigative tools to prove or disprove what we were being told. So we've set up a collection system for intelligence, that we maintain a database. We take that information and push it to the individual investigations using whatever tools we can to forward that investigation. Many times investigations, this is something that needs to be made clear. A lot of times we investigate, it's important to disprove things as much as it is to prove things. So we may go out and investigate somebody that we've been told a certain thing, and we find that not to be true. And that's as valuable as finding the actual guy that's doing wrong, because then we can differentiate and separate and better use our resources. So it's an ongoing challenge, and it's really going to be based in setting our program up and remaining vigilant and relying on good cooperation through industry experts, sources, whistleblowers, cooperating witnesses, and using all the tools that we have through testing, and investigations together to accomplish that goal. And it's a never-ending battle. Like I said, it's almost similar to, it's very similar, a different category, but the way in which that organized crime was looked at when they were successful with those investigations. It was a 25, 30-year program that you were able to apply all that knowledge and all that education that you've gained from one investigation, pushing it forward to ongoing current investigations. And that's something that has not really been done before because of bandwidth and the local jurisdictions being so isolated from each other. So it's a big change in the industry.
Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned the Servis and the Navarro case, which was, a major event in the history of horse racing. We hadn't seen anything like that in a long time, if ever at all. And there was a rumor that a second wave, maybe even more significant than the first wave, was going to follow. And to date, that never happened. Do you think that hurt credibility at all of HISA, or kind of made some people that might have been on edge or on high alert a little bit more relaxed, saying, hey, you know what, maybe it's all over and we don't have to worry about that anymore?
I don't know. That comes down to their individual ideas and how they perceive things. It's two different things. HISA wasn't, connected to that investigation in any way, shape, or form. Right. After that investigation, was concluded, then they came with the act. So they're separate. They're not one and the same. I don't have a real great answer because that comes down to their individual perception.
Okay. Anything else that either of you two want to mention or get out there, or did we pretty much hit on most of the important points or things that we wanted to hit on?
I mean, I think I could always reiterate that we're always here. We are approachable, and we're willing to listen. And we hope that any of those listening to this realize that they can call us, and we are always striving to educate and inform the industry on what we're doing as well, and specifically the rules themselves. So the rules have been a complex change in this industry, and we want to be there to help those that don't understand, because That's not what we're here for. We're not here to catch those that just don't understand.
Okay, Shaun, anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I would say one, to accomplish this goal for the industry, we're going to need help from the industry, and that goes to all the individuals that were regulating it before, all the people that are involved in it, business, hobby, people who are industry leaders. We need help to accomplish this goal. And, there's no way we can do it without everybody pulling together. And, we're open, to discuss and work accordingly.
Okay. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on Past the Wire TV. Hopefully we were able to get some good information out there to the public and to the people in the industry. And I thank you both for your time. I'll stop the recording now. We can say goodbye quickly off camera. And thank you all for coming on.
Thanks, Shaun.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King John Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
Does it better.